Hi, I'm Mercedes Faub here at the Captured on Canvas studio. Welcome to Picture This. For today's painting, picture this. We're going to do something very Christmassy. We're just going to do an adorable portrait of Santa Claus with Rudolph, snuggled close and tight. Then for a background, we're going to do just a simple rustic wood grain background, and then we're going to play a little bit with highlights and low lights with some metallic gold paint. I'll show you how we can do that. Before we get started, we'll make sure we have everything sitting in front of us. Most importantly, on my easel, I have my blank 16 by 20 canvas standing horizontal today. Make sure to have a cup of water as well as a sponge for cleaning those brushes. We're going to be using 3 paintbrushes today, my 3 favorite. My nice largest brush for large areas, my middle size angular brush, and last but not least, my tiny brush for tiny detail. On my paint palette, I'm going to have all the Christmassy colors. First, we're going to have a lot of white, a lot of brown, some metallic gold, red, green, burnt sienna, but I'm going to call it reddish brown because it's a lot easier to remember, and then we also have some black. To get started, I always like to start with the background and paint the closest thing last. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my largest brush. With that wood grain background, we're just going to play with a little bit of color here. We're going to jump from the white and that burnt umber, that chocolatey brown, and we're just going to bounce back and forth. So you get to already make it your own with deciding more white or more brown, lighter or darker. So I'm going to start with the brown though, and I'm going to use that wide side of my brush and start across the top of my canvas. I'm going to start going all the way across. And always remember your sides, especially when we're going to be going between a lot of colors here. Does make it look more finished if we get around all of those edges. And don't forget about that top edge too. So after I get a good amount of that brown on there, I'm going to go ahead and just dip into my white without cleaning my brush, start right underneath the brown and go all the way across. We can overlap here, getting a nice little blend between the 2 colors. We don't want it to look like a striped white and brown background, so just don't be afraid to overblend here. Now don't forget the sides again. I always sound like a broken record, but that's all right. I always forget one little area. I'm going to dip back into the brown, add a little bit underneath the white, and we're just going to alternate to color in the entire canvas. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go into the next step already because it's not going to hurt it if this is a little wet. So I'm going to first clean my brush. So for the next step, we're going to jump right into making the Rudolph. So how I like to make my Rudolph is kind of cartoony, makes it nice and simple and makes it more on the cute side. So I'm going to use my largest brush here, and I am going to be using brown, but I do want it a little bit lighter. So I am going to go ahead and start with a big, healthy scoop of brown and plop that in the middle of my palette away from my other colors. About the size of a quarter. You don't want to have to remix this color if you don't have to. And then I'm going to take a little bit of white and mix that in. So I'll say somewhere in that range there. So I always like to start with dots, reference points, makes it a little easier than just going and drawing it on the canvas. So I'm going to map out right where I'm going to have Rudolph's head here. I'm going to have it a little bit to the right from center. And I want his head to stand about halfway up on the canvas because I want to make sure he's going to be plenty big, but with plenty of room for his antlers as well. So I'm going to say about a little bit above halfway, a little bit to the right from center. Somewhere in there I'm going to start with the dot. And I do know this can be a little hard to see for a little bit just because we have that brown background. But I'm going to start with the center line coming down and angle it out a little bit. And I'm going to go until I'm approximately 3 to 4 fingers up from the bottom. So that is my center line. With this, I think it's easier to draw him symmetrically on the left and right side. So I kind of think of his head as kind of like a pear shape. So I'm going to start from the top, round down to the left, round down to the right, like a big frown. We kind of got our little umbrella here. So then I'm going to continue down, and then I'm going to round it out just a little bit to give him more fuller cheeks, and then curve that into the bottom of that center line. I'm going to mirror that on the other side now. Go down, flare out, and smile big to the other side. So there is the general shape of Rudolph. We're going to go ahead and color that in. So there is Rudolph. But we have to make sure he has ears, so I'm going to use this color and start with a dot where I want each of the ears. So in the upper right corner and the upper left corner is where my ears are going to be. They're just kind of like a football shape. You can make them as big or as little as you want. And I'm just going to curve up like a big frown, approximately the width of my hand. Then I'm going to smile nice and big back down into my Rudolph there and color it in. Now the left ear is kind of interesting because later I will be making a Santa hat that most likely will cover it, but you know what? It doesn't hurt just to paint it in just in case it doesn't. So I am going to make a big frown again, making it the same size if you can, and color it in. All right, and there we are. We're gonna go ahead and clean off our brush. And for Santa's hat, it is red, but I do like to darken it a little bit, kind of give it more of a maroon shade. So I'm gonna take a big scoop of red and plop that again somewhere on my palette, wherever I have room. If you want that brighter red, you can use the red as is, but I always like to add just a little bit of white without making it pink. It just makes it a little more opaque. But otherwise, if you're gonna do darker, I'm going to just add a little bit of black and mix that in. Okay, so maybe just a smidge more. Alrighty, so with the red, I'm going to decide where the rim of the hat is going to be. So we want that to be approximately halfway up or maybe just a little bit under his ear, kind of in that general area. So that's kind of a good reference. I'm going to start really close to Rudolph and have this big frown that kind of goes across, and I would stop it so it's about maybe the width of your 2 fingers from the left side. Then I'm going to go kind of straight up, and we're going to kind of wrap it up and around to go behind our Rudolph. So we're going to go up. You can add a little wave to it if you want it to be kind of a floppy hat. And I had it go right between the ears. And then I'm going to imagine that this is going to continue, and we're going to finish with the end of the hat. Nice big smile over there to fill in the right side of our canvas. From here, I'm going to make the other side. I'm going to start from the point and smile down, making it a little bit bigger through the middle there, kind of a banana shape. And then I'm going to color it in. And there we are. We want to make sure to let this dry, so we're going to take a little break. In the meantime, clean your brush. We'll see you in a few. Welcome back to Picture This. We had just started our Christmassy painting of Santa Claus and Rudolph. We're going to go on to the next step here, and we're going to give Santa Claus a face. I'm going to be using my largest brush here, and I'm going to mix that skin color. Not always an easy color to mix, but I have a cool little quick secret. So we're going to start with a big scoop of white, again about the size of a quarter, just to make sure we're going to have plenty. And then I'm going to take a little bit of that reddish brown here and mix that in. Okay, so once you feel good about that, we're gonna take it to the canvas. I always like to start with a dot because we're gonna be making an oval shape. So I always start with the dot, and then I'm gonna spiral out so then we can get the right size for our face. Now again, it's kind of like I'm jumping all over the place, but it'll make sense later. So we're gonna come down just a couple inches, maybe about 2 to 3 fingers, and make a dot in the center underneath the hat. From here, I'm gonna spiral out until I get the size face that I want. I don't want it quite as wide as my hat. So we're gonna go pretty close, and I'm gonna make it a little bit wider than I am tall. Nice long brush strokes. Just kind of swipe one side to the other here. And you know, it doesn't hurt to make it a little bit bigger than you think you're gonna want because we are going to be painting over a lot of this with the fluff of the hat and the beard. Okay, so something about that size, it's definitely larger than my hand. And then we're gonna go ahead and clean off our brush. We're gonna jump into our next step here pretty quick because we wanna give them a little bit of blush. So with that middle-sized brush now, I'm gonna take a little bit of red and dabble it off until I swear I have hardly anything left in my brush. We're gonna do a little bit of, I guess what you'd consider dry brushing at the moment. Really dry brush. Then we're gonna take that to about halfway up to the left from center and spiral out to give them a little bit of blush. And we're gonna do that same thing for the right side. If you need to dabble again, make sure you really dabble it off. And just let it blend in with that skin color. Alrighty, go ahead, clean your brush. While we let that dry, we're gonna go back to Rudolph for a moment, and we're gonna give him a nice green scarf, tie in our other Christmas color. So with this, I am gonna be using green, but green tends to be a little see-through. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take a little bit of white on the corner of my brush and mix that in. Just a little bit is enough to make it more opaque. And then with that, we're gonna go ahead and make that fat stripe right underneath his neck for that fluffy scarf. But let's make sure we go out plenty far to the lower right corner of him. We don't want it to be too small and then make it look like he's choked. So make sure that it's plenty far out. Smile all the way down underneath his chin. Sometimes I lift my canvas too to get up on that little edge so I can get to the bottom better. And then on that far right, I'm just gonna have a little curl out or a little curve and then finish coloring it in. Alrighty, we'll go ahead and clean off our brush again. So my face should be pretty dry at this point, and if not, just wait a minute until it is. But I am gonna go ahead and start with the fluff around the brim of the hat. So with my largest brush, I'm gonna start with white. And it's kind of like painting a big puffy cloud, big cumulus cloud. So with this, I'm gonna start to the right side here, and I am gonna overlap my red hat about 1 inch. I'm gonna just kind of make all these little bumps, some bigger, some small, going all the way across, making just a big cloud. And then I'm gonna come down a little bit, making some thickness on this side. And then I'm gonna do the same thing across the bottom, making sure that I'm overlapping that face. With this brush, I'm just gonna get a little bit of brown on it. And then I'm gonna do some figure eights, some X's, scribbles, whatever your heart desires, just to fill in so that is not completely solid white. Kind of going for that vintage look today. But I'm just gonna wipe off my brush here and start the beard. We're gonna do exactly pretty much the same thing. With the white, I'm gonna start with the left side, but this time it might be like a little curve outward. Sometimes I'll use the thin side of my brush to make a hair, kind of flicking out. And I'm gonna dance that all the way down, however works for you. Make it natural. Not all curls are perfect. We're gonna do the same thing on the right side as well. So just kind of a little curl out, little bump, coloring it all the way down. Got a little bit of green, so I'm just gonna wipe my brush. And then I'm gonna do the mustache. So the mustache does have a little bit of technique here. I'm gonna start from the center of the face, and I am gonna overlap that face quite a bit. So it's just underneath those rosy cheeks. From here, I'm going to round up, making a big frown, and then I'm going to smile up that left side of the face. I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. So round up, smile up, and then we can finish from the bottom with a big smile, making those sideways teardrop shapes. So from the center, smile up to that little point. We can color that in. And then we can finish coloring in the rest of the beard with white. And then we're gonna finish with his little hat over there with this color. So with the white, we're just gonna go back to the white. We're gonna make a puffy cloud for the end of the hat. So far over here, we're just going to kind of wrap it around, making it as big or as little as you want. And at any time, if you feel like a smaller brush would work better for you, use that smaller brush. And there we go. If you want to do a second coat, you always can. But then we're going to clean off our brush. All right, for the next step, it's always a little nerve-wracking, but I think this will work out really good. So I'm going to use my big brush. I know a lot of people like smaller brushes though, so do feel free to use a smaller brush. But with me, I like the big brush. And with the white, I'm going to make Rudolph's antlers. With this, I'm going to start with 2 dots right where I'm going to have those antlers come right out of the top of his head. So it's going to be just to the right of the left ear and just to the left of the right ear, yeah. I always confuse myself with that left, right there. So from here, I'm going to make that main part of my antler. For the right one, it's going to go pretty straight up, then it's going to curve over and curl up to the top. Honestly, whatever you feel like works best to fill in that space. If you have a lot of open space up there, you might have bigger antlers. If you have less space, you can always make smaller. But at the end, I just get really light pressure. And then I'll do the same thing for the left antler. From here, go straight up, level out, and swoop up. And then do a second little coat. And I do thicken the base of that antler a little bit. And now we can add the points. You can add as many or as little as you want, and you can place them wherever as well. For me though, I do have a strategy in how I like to do them. I always like to start from the tip of the point and then pull. So I'll show you when I do my first one. If I start with one right here, I like to think of it like the letter Y as well, not going straight out. So I'm gonna start from the end, push and pull. So it's just gradually going in, and naturally with that pressure, it made that rounded tip. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to push and pull into the rest of my antler. You can always do a second coat if preferred. But you know, sometimes I like these a little see-through because it gives it a little bit of texture. As long as your brush strokes are long with the antler. Alrighty, we'll go ahead and, well, we'll take a little break to make sure that's all dry before we finish with all that fun detail. Welcome back to Picture This. We are just about ready to finish our adorable Santa and Rudolph portrait. So I'm going to be starting with my next step, making sure that they both get their noses. So I'm going to be using that middle-sized brush, and I'm going to be mixing a little bit more pinky of a nose. So I did have some skin color left, so I will be adding red to that. If you need to mix more, just start with white and a little bit of that reddish brown. But then we're going to add a little bit of red to it, making it a little bit more pinky. So with this, I'm just going to make that dot right where I want the center of his nose, right between his little mustache here, right up at the top. And from there, I'm just going to spiral out, making that kind of either circle or oval shape. And remember to breathe. We're starting to get tedious here with our details. And once you have a nose, you can clean off your brush. Rudolph's nose is going to be kind of the same deal, but a lot bigger. You can use that red that you mix for your hat, which is that maroon color with that little bit of black to your red, or you can use the bright red. I will use the maroon though, kind of keep into that rustic color scheme. Again, start with that dot in the center of where you want that nose. So I would say it's centered left and right, but about 1/3 the way up from the bottom. And from here you can spiral out. I kind of made it an oval, but kind of a little bit rounded of an upside down triangle. Really, there's no right or wrong. I've seen it all sorts of ways. So once I get out farther, I might just make the width of the top of my nose kind of like a slight frown. And then maybe I'll curve it in, so you can spiral out or do this. And then bring it down to a nice little rounded point. And then I'm just gonna carry that out until I get it to the right size. I like that nose nice and big. Smooth out that paint. Some days I glob it on. Today I think is one of those days that I'm really globbing, but that's okay. All right, so we may as well just keep with this red if you want to decorate your scarf for your Rudolph. I just added these little angled lines going down, just kind of dash throughout. You could do polka dots, whatever your heart desires. And then I'll clean my brush. All right, so our next step here is a pretty big step, and it is going to be the black outlining. So always remember to relax when you're doing the outlining. Always remember light pressure is going to make those thinner lines. Sometimes the quicker you move, sometimes that's the smoother lines. You have less time to wiggle. So I like to use that middle-sized angular brush here. I like it because it holds more paint, but if you don't like that brush, you can always use your tiniest brush. But one more tip here, we're going to take some black to the side and water it down. Take that brush, dip it in your cup of water, and mix that in until you get a nice fluid consistency. Just make sure not to water it down too much. So light pressure here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start outlining the outside of my hat. Really light pressure. Sometimes I rest my pinky. Just kind of skip where those antlers are. Continue on the other side here. And then we can also add these little frowns throughout his hat there. Just kind of alternate them wherever your heart desires. Sometimes the less I think about it, the more natural it looks. Then I'm going to just go to the beard, but with the beard, we're only going to outline the mustache kind of fully, and then we're going to just partially outline the rest, because I think sometimes too much outlining isn't a good thing either. So with this, I'm just going to outline the top of his mustache. Start from the center and smile down and up for the bottom, just like we drew it out before. Same goes for the right side. Smile down and up. And for the nose, I only outlined the bottom, make it more of a shadow. But then for the rest of the beard, I'm just going to add in little wiggly lines. So some of them can be near the edge, at the edge, kind of just alternating through. You can add some throughout, kind of giving it the flow. If you feel like it's too much, try a little less paint on your brush, lighter pressure, and you can always take white over it later too, and that kind of really softens that harsh black if you don't like it. And then we can also outline the bottom of our nose for Rudolph. Okay, one more part of the outlining is the antlers. So again, I don't fully outline. I just liked outlining the bottom sides. So it works more again as a shadow versus a full outline. So just along the base here. Alrighty, and while I have this brush, I'll do a smile. We'll make sure that Rudolph is happy over here. Yay. And we're gonna clean off our brush. I'm gonna start with those oval eyes really close on both of my little guys here. So for Santa, it's gonna be centered above the nose. Sometimes a little dot to start is easy. You can leave it as a little dot. But otherwise, you can just spiral out so you get the size and color it in. Make sure when you go back and forth to fix them to the right size, just be careful. Sometimes then you end up with big goggle eyes, and that's okay too though. I'll go over and do Rudolph's the same way, just kind of centered above my nose. Start with a couple dots. You can either spiral out or draw it. Color it in. Alrighty, so we're gonna go ahead and clean off our brush. In the beginning today, I did mention that we were gonna use that metallic gold for highlights and lowlights. Well, that is what we're gonna work on now. So with my middle-sized brush, metallic gold, I'm gonna add the shadows to the beard. So what I like about this, it just kind of creates a little bit more depth. And me, I love sparkle. So it always is fun to add it in when I can. So I'm just gonna do a swipe maybe next to the outlines with the wide side of my brush to kind of create these shadows in there. All right, go ahead and clean off your brush. Again, with that middle side of the brush, I'm gonna use that white and make little, basically hashtags throughout the hat. Or wherever else you want to do. Otherwise, the next step I'm gonna add is that glare to the eyes. I do like to use the back side of my brush though. Actually, if you dip it into the white, you'll get a perfect dot every single time. So I just choose one side or the other, left or right, make that little dot, and look at that, they come to life. We're gonna wipe off the back of your brush so you don't forget. So for our final step, we just have a little bit of outlining with the black. We're gonna take light pressure, or just kind of outline that smile to bring that out. And then we're gonna make the opening of his mouth black. So we're just gonna color in between that mustache. And there we have it. So before any artist thinks they're finished though, I always like to sign my artwork. So I do master that with my tiniest brush. With whatever color you want. I do like to sign in the lower right corner and put what year I did it as well. Watering down that black, light pressure, and sign it. And we'll put the year on it. And there we are. We have our Santa and Rudolph portrait. Thank you so much for following along with me, Mercedes Fav, at the Captured on Canvas studio. We'll see you next time on Picture This.